Okay, part 2 of the Islamic Caliphate attacks Australia 100 years ago.
Good looking, graceful in their movements. They didn't drink, they didn't gamble, they didn't have prostitution. They were very devout people. And I think many women, I say many, I mean, the Afghan camp probably constituted about 30 at any one time. But sometimes they intermarried with white Australians. And you have evidence of white wives with 5 children there. So there's clearly much more of an interaction than the kind of union community wanted there to be. And that's why I decided to make the girl I described who was shot, her skull's been off, I decided to make her a tiny bit older and make her somebody who had already gone to the Afghan camel camp, been interested and had her horizons prized open by the ice cream seller. So she wasn't having an affair, but she was at least having a kind of the limited world she lived in being expanded by talking with somebody who was known as an alien. And I think that's why, in the end, fiction was the only way I could solve this. Because,
there's a touch of Miss Quested reaching out for her Indian friend in in that wonderful Forster novel. So,
well, I think, I mean, I'm going to go. I mean, I'm such a worshipper of your great writer, Patrick White. I mean, I would say Voss,
yes,
and in The Fringe of Leaves. I mean, I'm sure at the back of my mind is the kind of examples of white Australians who are somehow accessible to the interior. And fiction, I mean, I'm always struck by something that the American philosopher Richard Rorty said. He said that one way fiction differs from history is that it forces the reader to experience a subject's pain. Cruelty, Rorty says, is the worst thing we can do. And so by imagining another suffering, it becomes harder to inflict pain ourselves, I think, is his message. And so fiction, by dramatizing the particular and the idiosyncratic and the personal, invites our sympathy and our empathy, and therefore holds out the promise, if it works, of making us less cruel. And that's why I always, when people say, why did you write this as fiction? Why didn't, well, I did it as fact as much as the facts would lead me. But in a sense, to make sense of it, I had to then revert to my normal impulse, which is that of a novelist.
One of the reasons you've got to imagine is because, of course, so much of the story is now missing in action. We don't even know, I understand, where these 2 blokes were buried.
There were various stories that they'd been buried on the concrete floor by an Aboriginal tracker who was plied with whiskey, and they dug a hole in the floor, and now a cottage that was used for ammunition, and now that's vanished. We don't know where it was. There were all these stories. What we do know is that 2 graves were being dug for them by a municipal grave worker, and he was stopped in the action of digging it by a really irate crowd who just torched the German club in Broken Hill, and they stopped him digging it. So these unfinished graves were left without any bodies in them, and over the next few months and years, they just filled up with the desert winds. And I feel that, in a sense, they're ghosts of the unburied bodies are what drove me to write this novella, because you see their ghosts reappear all over the world, in China, in Paris, in Boston, as I say, in Woolwich. I got back from Broken Hill, and 2 weeks later, these 2 Muslim Nigerians attacked a British soldier in Woolwich. So I feel these are manifestations of the unburied bodies.
They certainly are. Look, thank you very, very much, Nicholas. Nicholas Shakespeare. The book is Oddfellows, published now by Vintage Books, and there's also the monthly essay. Thank you, Nicholas. Now, on our next, and Nicholas just mentioned.
Well, there you go. The only differentiating comment I'd like to add to that is that when I first researched the topic, I gained the impression that the people on the picnic train, when they saw the ice cream truck, thought that the ice cream truck had come to the railway crossing in order to sell ice creams. So therefore, they were remarkably surprised when they were being shot at. The story further developed that beside the picnic train, there were young fellow-me lads who were riding horses who had hunting rifles so that they could shoot rabbits or kangaroos or anything else that happened to be there. And when it was realised by the Europeans on the picnic train that they were being shot at by two people who were leaning across the bonnet of the ice cream van, then immediately, because all Australian male high school students were compulsorily enlisted in the cadet movement at the time, and they'd all had basic fundamental British military battle drill training, what happened then was the blokes on horseback attempted to attack frontally and to flank the ice cream cart. So, there goes our swamp wallaby. Not interested in listening to this story, apparently. However, we have got a currawong still paying attention. So anyway, another outrider was dispatched to the town to tell the local British Imperial Police that an attack had been mounted on the picnic train. There we go, see? Charlie Currawong got himself a biscuit. So to continue the story, a posse was immediately raised in the town of Broken Hill. The posse set off on the road, heading in the general direction of the railway crossing whereupon the initial attack had taken place. Along the way, the police posse encountered an ice cream van. So they tried to flag the ice cream van down to ask if they had seen anything of a bunch of gunmen who had been shooting at the picnic train. So therefore, a couple of the posse were also shot at and hit, and I think a couple of them were killed as well. Once the posse realised that, yes, these people know all about the shooting at the railway, then the posse cornered the two soldiers of the Caliphate, shall we say, and attacked them, and the soldiers of the Caliphate retreated to a place called Silver Hill. And therefore it's known in the history books, those of them that are detailed to mention the event, it's known as the Battle of Silver Hill, not Broken Hill, Silver Hill, right? And it has been said, not entirely tongue-in-cheek, that the Battle of Silver Hill was Australia's justification for invading Turkey, because, according to McDougall's Australians at War, which is humbling and remarkably good, we find on page 52 that, flanked by the Turkish officials, a mullah proclaims jihad against the infidels in Constantinople, November 1914. Few Muslims heeded the call, and Muslim regiments in Britain's Indian Army remained loyal to the Raj, apart from one battalion that mutinied in Singapore in 1915. On the outbreak of war, Turkey declared jihad, a holy war against the infidels. The Khedive of Egypt echoed his ruler's call and was promptly replaced by the British with a more pliable prince, and Egypt was itself declared a British protectorate. As early as 25 November, at the first meeting of the new War Council in London, Winston Churchill, whose lively mind never rested, suggested that the ideal method of defending Egypt was by an attack on the Gallipoli Peninsula. This, if successful, would give us control of the Dardanelles, and we could dictate terms at Constantinople. This, however, was a very difficult operation requiring a large force. So as it happens, nowhere in Australians at War is it recorded that at the Battle of Silver Hill, a disgruntled camel butcher and a hyper-patriotic ice cream salesman could decide between themselves that because the British Empire had declared war on the Muslim Caliphate and the Caliph in Turkey had called for a jihad against the British Empire, that therefore they should attack the Broken Hill New Year's Day picnic train. But There you go. That particular fella on the radio show, he wrote a novel about it. Me personally, I heard about it years, decades ago, and I've mentioned it in a few YouTube movies. It's really nice to have somebody else come out and highlight the fact that the event occurred. I mean, in the chronology of it all, the reason the Moslems at Broken Hill attacked the picnic train was because they were, as loyal, patriotic citizens of the Caliphate, responding to the call for jihad, they were actually also responding to the Australian Imperial Forces amphibious attack on West Papua in September and November 1914, which was a strange little event where they took a couple of aeroplanes in crates up there with the idea of using them to bomb the German Lutheran missionaries because Lutherans were Germans. And when the Lutheran missionaries surrendered before they could get the aeroplanes out of their crates, then the army went on to have all their officers charged with arson, loot, and pillage and rape. But nonetheless, it all gives Tony Abbott, he who knighted a prince, excellent reasons to think that Australia's doing the right thing by reliving its own history because it doesn't fucking know its own history. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao. Why else do you think we're bombing the Muslim death cult? Because it's anti-God? It's costing us in excess of $560,000 every night. We have two F-18 Hornets take off and fly a 10-hour mission. And they're bombing third-hand Humvees given to ISIL by the Iraqis because they didn't value them because it was given to them by the Americans. Pah! History repeats. I told you that. Ciao.